We are going to start our discussion on lines, circles, arcs, and their relations. So these are typical relations that you would see applied to the geometry. And so when we look at a line, we'll have the two endpoints, the line segment between the two endpoints, and a midpoint as available selections. The endpoints can have a horizontal, vertical, coincident, or midpoint relation applied to them and other geometry. The line segment itself can be horizontal or vertical. And when we're dealing with arcs, we'll see that it can also have tangency. The distance dimension will set the length. And two line segments can be parallel, collinear, perpendicular, or have an angular dimension. So the collinear means that the line segments are separate, but they share the same line. And then our circle are points equidistant from the center. And then you have a center point. So the circle perimeter can be tangent, concentric, and co-radial. And co-radial is sharing the same radius and center. The center point can be horizontal, vertical, coincident, diametral dimension. Oh, yeah, the diametral dimension to define its size. And then the arcs. Arc is two endpoints, the arc segment between those endpoints, and a center point. The endpoints can be horizontal, vertical, coincident, and also be attached to a midpoint. The arc segment itself will probably be tangent, and the center point is horizontal, vertical, or coincident. And I needed to add concentric in there, so let's go ahead and make that concentric. All right, so concentric having the same center as other arcs or circles. Then it will have a radial dimension where the circles are going to automatically default to a diameter. The arc is going to default to a radius. And then two arcs, or an arc and a circle, are concentric and co-radial and the same radius. So maybe that was what I was doing here. So we'll update that again. So let's get into drawing some lines and circles and arcs. All right, so we need a new part. I'm just going to go new. We'll use the default, and in the next couple of videos we will go ahead and set a template. All right, so let this catch up. We're going to be in our sketch tool. I still like to do the front plane and sketch. All right, so whichever plane I want to sketch in, we're just going to jump into that sketch. All right, so we've drawn a few lines. Under the pull down, you have line, center line, and midpoint line. So a line is, if I do the click click, and my sketch dimension, it's already active. So let's get back to that. The sketch numeric input is active, and we've set in the options to only apply the dimension if we put in a value. So if I go back, have it going into the S key, so get used to seeing the S key, and S is on the keyboard. So if I click click and go 3, and then it's going to be continuous, which I'm not really used to. So let's see, another way to get into line is L on the keyboard. Right, so I'm a click dragger, and we'll see that predominantly. So when I hit 3 and enter, it's going to apply it, and then I let go of the mouse button. And then moving the dimension to someplace more visible, something a little more convenient, we're just going to left click on that dimension, hold down, and drag. All right, so as we move this around, these can orbit each other. They don't have necessarily a dimension. So let's look at the relation. That one got a horizontal. That one also inferred a horizontal, and if we go back and look at the video, we would probably see the little yellow box popped up, and I didn't think to point it out. So making an endpoint coincident, I'm just left click, hold down, and drag. And again, this is showing up in magenta because of my first selection color. Yours may be a different color. All right, so as I get close, I'm going to see those inference lines, and those are telling me that I'm horizontal or vertical to the endpoints. And when I drag, it shows concentric, even though it will make it coincident or not really show anything. Basically, it's acting like a merge. All right, so we'll talk about merge in a little bit. All right, so we have, let's see, let's go into Smart Dimension. We have the non-parallel. We'll go, okay, let's just round that up, 85 degrees. All right, so our interior angle, if we were to go the opposite, then we would have, what, the 105. All right, so we can put those angles in a variety of locations. So let's illustrate that real quick. Undo, undo. And we'll jump up here this time, Smart Dimension. If I go between those lines, then there is my what adjacent angle. Oh yeah, 95, proving once again I can't do math. And then the full angle and the interior. So let's go with that 85 degrees again. All right, so as it sets, then this is by grabbing an endpoint. This is going to be my first debug tool, is to move it around, just observe how it's reacting to being drug around the screen, and then we'll go between the two and make that 2 inches, and then it's still able to move because everything's in blue and I haven't tied it to the origin. So that's what the recommendation will be, to go ahead and your very first object, your very first endpoint, center point, go ahead and attach it to the origin. And let's see, if we go to the 2 inches and highlight it, I'm just pressing delete on the keyboard. I can also right click and select delete. Right, so those are going to stay, but they can also move. And then one that I didn't mention was equal, so I'll need to go back and add that to the list. All right, so if I select Control Select, all right, so this is the first time I've select Control Select. So select the first entity or the object, and then hold down the Control button and select the next entity. And then on our pop-ups, you're going to see the horizontal, vertical, collinear. The collinear would in effect send this line to 0 and create an error. So let's see if we go back into that. I just clicked on the line, one of the selected lines again. Perpendicular is going to create an error. The parallel is, well, they're both horizontal, so parallel isn't going to help, but it's not going to hurt. Where these others will create the error, parallel is, it basically already is. And then to make them equal, they now share the 3-inch number. Going across the top here, please avoid fixed. Fixed is not your friend. We'll talk about fixed later. It's a temporary solution, but it's not something that we want to use as a strategy. Right, so let's go ahead and we'll drag this in place, and I'll make it coincident. And then notice that these went to defined, and as I build this through, I can't move left and right. I can only kind of move it up and down based on the angle. So we did the between two. I did not apply to the object, so let's go to the Smart Dimension, and we'll go back to a vertical, which is really what we're looking for, the horizontal, and also, if I get it in the right place and got to kind of look for it, is the linear dimension following the angle. So we can get all three of those, and then all I would do is click and place it. And then last on the list is to put the two endpoints. And I know from using AutoCAD that their strategy kind of defaults back to endpoints and center points rather than the objects themselves. So that may be changing as they get more parametric, and really the modelers are becoming more similar than they are different. So while this will work, I illustrated in one of the other videos that if you have those points, then they will have the ability to orbit each other and can do some strange things. All right, so we put in the 1.93 to edit it. I went ahead and clicked to edit it. I just double click on it again, enter the 2 inches, and when I click out of it, now I have fully defined. All right, so just some lines to work from. Let's go ahead and look at the circle. And we have the circle and the perimeter circle. So a circle is going to be, if I do the click and drag, and I'm going to try to keep it from inferring anything so that I don't end up with any extra. So as I'm drawing the objects, the sketch numeric input will go 2 inches. When I hit enter, it completes it for me. This is still able to move and drag around, but the size will not change. So if I just had a circle and no sizing, as I grab the perimeter, it will change size, and as I grab the center point and move it around, that will move the whole circle. So if I go center point to center point, I'm going to should see a coincident, even though it's showing a concentric item. And actually that's going to act like a merge again. So I've mentioned merge a couple times. Merge does not really create a relation, but if I go to move those, they now move together. So let's back that up a little bit, and Control Z, Control Z. And so if I go point to point as opposed to drag, there is the merge, and there is the coincident. So by adding a coincident, I get an actual relation that I can back out of. Dragging and dropping most of the time is going to be just fine. And when we click on the center point, it's going to show me, well, maybe not. The circles, yeah, looks like it reverted. It showed it to me a couple times, and then now it's not there. So that's interesting. I haven't really noticed that before. All right, so we wouldn't make these co-radial. If I do the select, control select on the circles, co-radial is an option, but now you're going to have two objects occupying on top of each other. And that doesn't really help because you don't really know if you're selecting the one on top or the one underneath to perform your relations. And if there's an issue, much like the lines will generate, if there's an issue, that second entity is usually the culprit. So let's go ahead and make a 1 inch. Co-radial would basically be the same as setting this to 2 inch. Right, so you can't tell that there's two objects there except that I have the dimension. If I did co-radial, except for the co-radial relation, I really wouldn't be able to tell that there's two objects there. All right, so concentric, coincident to the centers. Still kind of surprised that that went away. Let's go ahead and draw another circle. And if I make equal, select, control select, we can make those equal. And then if I select, control select, we can make those tangent. And tangent means that the circles touch at a point, and because they're not defined, they can orbit. All right, so they can move randomly, kind of unpredictably. So these lectures always end up being a little bit Art Deco, so let's look at what happens when we drag it to an endpoint. We see that concentric, and I wonder if I'm going to get the coincident again. Nope, pretty much not there. So since this has the equal, and as I select, because my sketch relations are turned off, all right, if I turn all those on, we're starting to accumulate little green boxes. To me, those are distracting. If you like having them on, leave them on, but probably will work in this environment. So to get rid of a relation, I'm going to go ahead and hit delete. And then to have the software figure out what size this circle is, if I want to attach that to the origin and keep it tangent, then based on our numbers, I can return a value that's a little bit over 1 inch on the radius. So again, with the parameters, whether it's the line parameters, 3 inches, 0 degrees, a little over 2 inches and 85 degrees, returning those values. Anything that we draw that we would put those parameters in. Let's just draw another line out here, and I'll scroll down. Parameters and additional parameters. I mentioned before that if you fill in all these values and then happen to come out here and drag something, all of those values change. All right, so being on the line segment, everything in here adjusts to its current position. Only the relations and the dimension as a relation can fully define your part. So let's go to the 3-point or the perimeter circle. So I have 1 point touching there, 1 point touching there, and let's go 1 point touching there. So it requires, doesn't necessarily require existing geometry. I can put a perimeter circle out anywhere, but it's not really that commonly used unless you're just doing like a what if scenario and kind of inferring what you want it to do. So I'm still in the circle command. So let's see. Really don't have anything in there except for the dimension to put on it. So let's leave that in. And again, I'm doing the zoom with the scroll wheel mouse, and the zoom occurs around the cursor. So wherever the mouse arrow is pointed, I'm zooming in and zooming out. On our center point arc, tangent arc, 3-point arc, depending on what we're trying to create. Center point arc, if I click, and then anytime you see those blue dashed lines, it's saying I'm waiting for more information. All right, so one more time, center point, pick the center, drag out some distance. That dashed line is saying, waiting on you. We click a point, drag approximately through the arc. And the thing to keep in mind is if it goes the wrong way, which occasionally you will start to drag and it will jump the other way, drag back to the beginning and continue on with the arc. Our tangent arc requires that something be in existence, and whatever endpoint you click, you're going to be able to drag off of that object. So if I do the select control select and were to make that tangent, it's going to go to the nearest tangency. And as I move these, they can do some awful strange things and probably end up being in an error or an unresolved state. And it will warn you for those, which is always kind of interesting. The continuous tangent arc then is to drag a line, and then I'm doing the click drag. If you do the click click and you go back to the center or to the end point, it's going to send you off to an arc. Everybody does this at some point and says, why do I get an arc? You get an arc because it's supposed to. So depending on what you want for your solution, I can go back to that endpoint, drag a different direction, and see the other solutions for my tangency. All right, so just going back, going over, up and back, and we can get all of those solutions, all those different arcs. So if I drag this to an endpoint, those become in effect coincident, and if I make those tangent, it's going to shift. So if that one kind of did what this did, I would drag it a little bit closer and try to make it more to the solution that I'm trying to create. And then arcs, let's see, we did, let's stay with the center point. We can go into the 3-point on this one. So 3-point arc, I want it to start about there, go to there, and then by dragging it, I'm going to get close to there. So here's a place where we can use co-radial, which would be an existing arc, whether it's a sketch or a feature. And if I do the select control select, we will go co-radial. And they do not have to be connected. And so it will shift and do whatever it's going to do. And we can move it to closer to position and build other geometry around it on the co-radial. So the 3-point arc, then pick the start point, the end point, get it to an approximate location. If you want to put the value in 3 inches on the radius, then it will apply it, and we can drag from the center point or from the endpoints or from the line, but expect different results from, well, with all of them, the geometry that you select. And then by comparison, our last circle here is going to default to a diameter. So if I wanted the diameter to be a radius, we're going to click on it on the dimension. It's going to send us to the property manager for that dimension. The first couple boxes here we have radius. So I can switch the diameter to a radius and the radius to a diameter, whichever one is easier. So keep in mind that the relations have a lot of horsepower. We're looking for this. And in our geometry, we have a lot of work to do on this side to get this to go fully defined, but we want to have those fully defined geometries so that nothing moves accidentally. If I leave a little blue dot, and my obsession with little blue dots is that if it can move, it will. And from a manufacturing or a production standpoint, it won't be till after you've made the 10,001th part to find out that, oh, that moved 10 thousandths and none of those will go together. So use fully defined sketches. Right now we're showing underdefined. And this part is fully defined. It doesn't move accidentally. There's no, it takes a conscious decision to move one of these, not just, oh, I happened to click on that endpoint and I changed the radius. So let's go ahead and select that and we will finish up here.